Welcome back to the Heron Outlet. I am joined, as always, by Alex Winley and Ian Hest, and our producer in the back, Andres. We're all here today to talk about some massive news. We're finally doing another transfer talk video. It's been a while since we've done one. It's probably been since the offseason, but this transfer is more worthy of it than ever. With Alejandro Pozuelo coming to Miami via a trade with Toronto, the 2020 MLS MVP. This is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, deals that Miami has done within the league. And now, with a number 10 that Miami has been craving since year one, they didn't get it with Pizarro. Have they now found it with Pozuelo? This could be the answer to a lot of issues that Miami have had. But we're gonna jump right into it. Let's discuss those issues and what Pozuelo may bring to this team. I'll start with you, Alex. Your initial thoughts on the reaction or on the signing, and your reaction to what this tactically does for Miami.
Huge news, very huge news. Miami has been looking for that creator since day one. They didn't get it with Rodolfo Pizarro. Now they have an MLS proven, MLS MVP caliber type of talent in their arsenal now, and it'll only help the Herons push on to the playoff spot. I think it's just the way this deal came about. Well, obviously were working behind the scenes, but um, it came out really quickly. Social media is very tricky, and players give away, their whereabouts just by who they follow. So, for, you know, like connecting the dots, it wasn't too difficult. So, it's just it's massive, especially for a team like Miami that people thought this rebuild would take years. Right now, they're way of ahead of schedule in that regard. Next season they will presumably have two, maybe three, but I have a feeling Pozuelo may stay in South Florida a bit longer. They'll have two open DP spots, so not only that they get an option to sign Pozuelo for a longer term contract next season. Presumably, Pizarro and Higuain will both be off the books as well. So yeah, as far as the signing goes for Miami's rebuild, it's absolutely huge. They'll get a player heading into the playoffs and potentially signing him for longer. And also, if he does sign here for longer, you have a player to build around and to get DPS that complement him and his play style.
Yeah, Ian, talk to me about what this does in Phil's style and Phil's formation, and what we've seen in a 4-3-3 this year, entering Pozuelo to that midfield three, and how he'll probably take up more of a central role. Does that suit him, and does that suit Phil?
It suits him for sure. Phil has tinkered a lot with the lineup. He even said after last game that he didn't say prefer, but that he really likes running a 3-4-3 if he could with the wingbacks that they have. I don't know if Pozuelo necessarily fits in that system, but definitely a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1, a very natural fit right up top. He sort of switched in recent years to being more of a facilitator in that maestro style role instead of the wow dribbler that he was, 2-3 seasons ago when he was an All Star and the 2020 MVP as well. So expect for him to. He's been a lot better on set pieces, free kicks this season. Really taking over that. He's great in goal creation and great in progressive passes. What do we mean by progressive passes? That's when we have, sometimes you'll hear it called route one, right? That direct angled ball that we talk about with Lassiter, with Vasilev a lot of the time, where those guys can get in instead of having Campana, which we've seen at times drop in, especially with Higuain when he's in the striker role. That they no longer have to have that drop in where their back is facing a goal and then they have to facilitate out into the wings. Instead, it's a pass on. So Gregory wins the ball in midfield. He passes on to Pozuelo, who starts the attack from there, and everybody's running in tandem together. That's really the big thing that will switch right off the bat for Inter Miami, which is good because it's something that we've been wanting to see from a formation and a style of play standpoint for a while.
Yeah, and I think one of the main words that I like to use when I think about this signing, what it does for the midfield, is balance. Because if you can think of all of Gregory, Mota, and Pozuelo on the field together, and you have someone like Bryce Duke at your disposal off the bench, I think the balance there is absolutely massive. I want to get to Alex on this. That my next point, and Ian kind of just touched on it. These progressive passes from the middle is not something that Miami have seen. It seems like a lot of the style of play this year, they've been lacking. play down the spine, combination play up the middle of the pitch. Most of it's been coming from the wings and inverted forwards in terms of Lassiter and Vasilev, and then finding Campana in the box way down by the byline, as Robert Taylor did to get the equalizer on Monday night. So what changes with Pozuelo then if you enter him into the lineup? Do they get a better balance in attack? Can they use a different style now, or is it just as simple as the pressure is off the wingers?
I think they'll run the same style, really. Same low high press, sit in the mid block, absorb that pressure, then hit people on the counter. Pozuelo is very good at passing in those progressive passes. So, especially when he has speedy wingers in front of him, like a Lassiter or Robert Taylor or Vasilev, or when Robbie Robinson comes back, Quarantine Jean. There's plenty of options to have Pozuelo on the ball. He's really excellent at ball retention and sort of evading defenders, having Pozuelo on the ball, then hitting them on the counter, hitting them in and behind through those channels that Miami and Lassiter specifically. Phil Neville likes to have his either a wing back or fullback or a winger. They love to hit those channels in and behind. You check out that Robert Taylor goal against Dallas. The Robert Taylor dribble that led to the Campana goal against Dallas. It came from playing in those final third pockets of space where you're able to get in behind the defense. So that's where Miami has made their bread and butter most of the time. They're not a high pressing team, so Pozuelo will not necessarily worry about that. But defensively, they do sit in this mid block where he will have to do some defending, but it's not going to be so heavy compared to some of the other teams in um, in MLS. So I think it'll just fit really well in the balance with Mata and Gregory. Maybe Mata won't have to try to be the facilitator as much as we see him take these long shots. Maybe instead of doing that, he'll pass it off to Pozuelo, who will have a better ankle. And not only that, you have Bryce Duke, presumably coming off the bench. Who knows? Sometimes he will start, obviously, but it's just a really good rotation. Getting a player, every top team in the league has a number 10 that they can defer to and difficult times on the pitch, or if they need to get their team out of something, to Laran, Reynoso, Carlos Gil up there in New England. Now Miami have Pozuelo, who could be that focal point for the attack.
And it'll be interesting to see if Higuain gives that 10 up, right? That number 10 shirt, when the time comes. But roles have changed, and I also will disagree with you just a little bit here, Alex. Is that I think styles have changed. I don't think that Pozuelo fits the that counter-attacking mold, and I don't think that Phil necessarily wanted to do that. I think it was out of necessity, and I think a player like Pozuelo allows you, especially in basketball, they call it a half court offense, and let's say there, right, you're stagnant, like midfield with your two center backs almost at the mid, the midway of the field, at that line. That now all of a sudden with a player like Pozuelo that you can put maybe 6-7 yards on top of the 18 and direct traffic around there, you can start to develop almost like a leveled up terms of winning the ball in defense, gradually having play, like I said before, with Gregory to Pozuelo, and try and find some motion. The problem where Inter Miami has had with that in the past is a lot of stagnation. They don't have a lot of motion. Players don't make that run. So that's where perhaps his experience, not only as that sort of facilitator, but also the experience that he has in this league, being one of the more successful players to do that in the league over the past several years, might be able to teach some of the guys like Indy, like Lassiter, who has shown it at times, or even like Campana, who's still learning defenders in this league. Most every time that Campana goes one-on-one versus a defender, it's the first time that he's ever seen this guy. So, all those little things of that experience might be able, not just experience writ large, but experience within the league, might be able to slow things down, calm, tranquilo style for Miami, to really have, instead of that frenetic pace. Because let's remember, especially in those counterattacks, a lot of them are coming from the back line. A lot of them are coming from Damian Lowe and Chris McVeigh. And those are those angled balls. Now I think that you can play through the spine and just a little bit more structure, a little bit more composure, that can be successful for an Inter Miami offense. And like you said, Alex, too, I don't expect him to have much defensive responsibility. And I don't think that he really needs to, especially if that Jean Mota is going to sit back there a little more and be able to survive that. So really, I think that this is a forward-thinking move in terms of offensive production for Inter Miami.
I'll pose one last question in terms of tactics and fit to style. Then we could talk about the actual the money stuff that comes with Pozuelo. But so we've seen a 4-3-3 from Neville. Sometimes we've seen Mota drop in as the lone pivot. Gregory is usually in that role. Does this shift now if all three of those guys are on the pitch to a 4-2-3-1, or does he keep it as a 4-3-3 and let Gregory work in the hole in between the center backs and have Malta and Pozuelo move up the field if they need to?
Honestly, I think it's always been a 4-2-3-1. It's just lined up as a 4-3-3. Whoever's on the pitch, there's always got one center midfielder pushing into those half spaces, playing as number 10. So I don't think it really changes much, honestly.
I would say there's time there are certain games in which I agree with you, but then there are other games in which Mota and Gregory are on the pitch together where it's very evident that he's trying to keep one as a lone pivot, and you can see that maybe a Bryce Duke and a Victor Ujoa, they're sticking to one side most of the time, and they don't have the ability, or Bryce Duke for the most part doesn't get the ability at times to get centrally if he wanted to. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. Like, is Pozuelo going to have absolute freedom to get central and play as a true number 10 in a 4-2-3-1?
I think that you do that. I think that you give him the true freedom because a player like Pozuelo will thrive when you give him that freedom. But you bring up an interesting point, Austin, and the fact that you could go if we're just sort of seeing formationally changes and structural changes that way. You could go to like a 4-1-4-1 and bring in a Bryce Duke because remember Pozuelo's a 2,000 minute, 2,500 minute guy. He's going to be out there pretty much day in day out playing. So in your midfield, if you have Pozuelo and Gregory, you mentioned stability to start the show or start this episode. You basically have solved two of those three day in day out with Gregory and Pozuelo, and Jean Mota is sitting there as like the guy that you think that you have, but he's Phil has talked about this a lot about competition. He's going to be fighting for minutes not only with Uoa but also Bryce Duke now. For a certain extent, and that will change the structure of the team. Is he an 8? Is he more of a secondary 10? Is he more of a secondary 6? These are going to be some of the questions that Pozuelo solidifying that number 10 role is going to bring up different options and different questions, not just for Jean Mota, but for other players around the pitch. To solidify that role can be so key to an offense. And if Inter Miami has the gem that they think that they do, at least for the rest of the season, so we'll get into the contract stuff here, but at least for the rest of the season, they don't lose a lot in just trying this out for a guy that they know is going to rack up minutes for the rest of the year.
And you are absolutely right about that. They did not lose a lot to be able to acquire Alejandro Pozuelo. News came out after the trade. I believe it was from Jeff Ruder of ESPN talking about it for the first time that 150,000 general allocation dollars were being sent to Toronto in exchange for Pozuelo and his contract, which does expire at the end of 2022. So when this trade is announced, by Inter Miami and by Toronto, it'll be interesting to see whether or not an extension is linked into the announcement as well. I think that that's something that we're all looking for, because if it isn't, the fact that you've got an MLS MVP on a 6-month rental with almost no repercussions at all, it's just low risk, high reward type move from Chris Henderson. You get to make the decision at the end of the year whether or not you want to extend him, and he's one of the 3 DPs that you're going to want going into 2023. How smart of a move was this from the front office to be able to get a guy with such high caliber for so little money, and not only so little money but so little risk, because you're not tied into a 30-year-old DP for years to come. You're only tied into him for 6 months. You have the money on the books available, and going forward, you're the one who ultimately gets to make a decision at the end of the year whether or not you want him to stick around or whether or not you can talk him down into a lower deal in terms of salary.
Yeah, you said low risk, high reward. I'll counter you with that with no risk, high reward. You're really losing absolutely nothing in this deal, which is the real shocker. It helped that Miami had a lot of leverage in this situation. You had a Toronto team that needed to move one of their designated players in order to make another signing. You had the player wanted to go. You had the to Miami and specifically stayed. Specifically was pushing for Miami, at least in reports that we've seen. You had these situations. Toronto was down in the table. Miami was looking to make a move at the position. So a lot of these dominoes seem to fall exactly correctly. You mentioned 150 in GAM or general allocation money that's going to happen from this. It really doesn't affect much because if you don't make this trade, well, you have what you have already, and nothing really changes. It's still standard quo. By making this, you don't even need the extension. But I think that at the end of the year, I think at the end of the year it makes a little more sense. Just let's see what we got here. You're 30 years old. You have stuff to prove. He's had a little bit of a down year, maybe a little bit of a changing role. But a lot has been made of that. He's still producing top 10 in terms of his role in the entire league. He's got 4 goals, 4 assists, 1,400 minutes played this year. Top of the league in goal creating action. So stuff like that. If you're contributing a goal or an assist every other game, I still think that you have a lot to contribute. So I think from a sheer money standpoint, 150 in general allocation money wasn't at this point in the season with the sanctions and with the players that have already gotten things. It wasn't going to make the difference between getting the crazy names that have been thrown out, which you're not going to get right now, and Pozuelo, right? This is more of an MLS style move, which we've seen Henderson really start to bring. So I think that it's sensible business. It winds up being really good for them. It fits Toronto's need because they were going to lose a player at the end of the year anyway. So they at least got something out of it, and maybe that goes a little bit ways towards their rebuild that it looks like Toronto is going to be making. For Miami, it looks like a no-brainer.
Yeah, and
Alex, yeah.
I agree. I think if it goes well, they basically have a rental for a DP caliber player, and they could choose to extend that. Of course, we'll wait until we see the actual details of the contract. That it could include, I don't know, maybe a team option for next year. I don't know, unless contracts are very peculiar. So yeah, we'll just wait and see what the contract details look like, and I'm sure it'll be something that it makes sense as far as Inter Miami standpoint go.
And don't forget, Austin, this is pure speculation, but with it being the last year of his deal, if it's renegotiated, there is a possibility that it still is designated player money, but at a salary that could, under the allocation rules, provide. Alex had mentioned earlier the likelihood of Pizarro not returning to the club, or Higuain perhaps being on his last tenure with the club as well. You do have a lot of flexibility at the top of your roster. So to make a move like that puts you in a position to compete immediately for 2022, for the second half of this season, but also provides you flexibility in a 2023 season that's going to be the last year of the sanctions, but also to 2024 and 2025, when you're starting to sign. A lot of these guys have been signed. You look at Coco, who's coming in now, has a team option later on. It's going to go through 2024, team options later. So they're locking in stability, but also locking in flexibility at the top of their roster to see if they've been burned by the designated players in their short history. So for the most part. So you have sort of that fundamental core that was missing from 2020 to 2021. Now from 2021 to 2022, you've sort of built that fundamental core. And now you have the flexibility with stars at the top, which I think will really breathe a healthier culture within the club.
It's just so refreshing to hear about like the flexibility at the top of the roster, because you think of a DP and what Miami has gone through with Rodolfo Pizarro not ever playing in MLS and not being able to get up to standard, and Higuain and Matuidi regressing as soon as they step foot in South Florida. And now you look at a proven MLS guy as a DP for Miami for years to come at a prime age. It seems like the tides are turning. It seems like the front office has got a grip on this that they hadn't had before. Before we go, I'm going to just ask for your guys' ratings out of 10. Make it simple. Pozuelo to Miami out of 10. What do you say?
9 out of 10. because I'm curious to see the contract details. I think a player of his caliber, I don't know if you let him walk at the end of the season to go somewhere else. I think Chris Henderson will put some clause in there that they have first dibs to renegotiate a contract, and I don't. I have this feeling he probably won't. He'll probably stay longer than what people are saying. So it's a 9 out of 10. Obviously, it is a 10 out of 10, but nothing is perfect, so I'm giving it a 9 out of 10.
Ian?
I'd say from a business standpoint, from a financial standpoint, it's a 10 out of 10. You're not going to get better from a designated player. We were talking earlier, off air that the most recent designated players don't get traded in this league very often. The most recent one was Giassi Zardes, who got traded for 300,000 in TAM. That could go up to like 1.1 million, I think, when he went from the Columbus to Colorado. So to get him for 150K, I think is just absolutely, you're not going to get better value there from a strict business standpoint. From an on the field standpoint, I'll say around like a 7, just simply because he hasn't had the 2021 and 2022 that we saw in 2019 and 2020. If he can return to that form, then this is a no brainer and a home run. But from on the field, his role has changed, like I mentioned earlier. If he's able to provide that set piece capability, if he's able to find and pick his spots to make those passes, then it's going to be great. If he winds up trying to be that hero and dribble through everything, there's going to be a little frustration there, and you'll see it sort of build in a team that tends to get a little frustrated when players try to do it all themselves. So that'll be when you'll need to reel it in. But again, I go back to it. You have absolutely nothing to lose here. The floor is completely up here. So anything that you get on this is icing on the cake. And for a player of this magnitude to say that before he's even stepped on the field is a win no matter what.
Yeah, I think the other DP move that happened was in the offseason of this year was Jamiro Montero from Philly to San Jose, which was for a significant amount more than what this was. So yeah, it's absolutely nuts. I'm gonna say 9 out of 10 as well. I just want to see what he does as a facilitator in this team, and that's kind of just where my not necessarily my concern is. But he's going from Toronto to Miami, which Miami at the moment are a much better team. Hopefully, he fits in perfectly and elevates them. And I think that he probably will, because when you have a guy playing with a team that's just been on the bottom of the table the entire year, you kind of want to unlock him a little bit if he comes over to your franchise, and you have pieces around him and hungry players around him that hopefully will make each other better. And that's just kind of what we're waiting to see, along with the contract details, which I'm sure we'll find out about if you're not already watching Thursday morning on Thursday morning. But with that said, Alejandro Pozuelo to Inter Miami. We'll see if he can suit up on Saturday. If not, hopefully the week after that. Alex, Ian, and for our producer Andres, thank you so much. This has been another transfer talk on the Heron Outlet, and we will see you guys another time.